Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, coronavirus rattles the nation. How prepared are we in Maryland? General Assembly struggles to pay for the Kirwan Commission. Montgomery County considers creating 9 separate council districts. And Bernie, Amy, and Liz lead the Maryland polls, but will the presidential primary race be over before the April primary? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Dean of Democratic Politics, Sam Statland, Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, President of the Chevy Chase Women's Republican Club, Laurie Halverson, and education activist, Cynthia Rubenstein. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. The coronavirus, that mysterious pneumonia-like ailment that emerged from Wuhan, China just a few weeks ago and has gone on to spread to more than 50 countries, is highly contagious and deeply dangerous. And as if waking up from a Rip Van Winkle stupor, the media and politicians seem to have finally decided to speak out on the subject. Sam, we've been very fortunate that we've had very few cases here in the United States. I guess there are 2 reported cases here in Maryland. But how prepared are we to address this potential problem?
Casey, as of today, there's 3 cases reported, and everyone is house confined. They came to the States from far Southeast Asia, and I think that we're doing a great job because we identified people quickly. They're in self-confinement in their own homes. We have great resources here in Maryland, starting with NIH and a terrific healthcare system. And more importantly, we have an insurance system that will get everybody care, whether they have money or don't have money, through our great affiliations of hospitals, nonprofits. We're going to provide health care. So I think we're really in great shape.
Thank you, Sam. So Mark, I'm not trying to diminish the dangers from the coronavirus, but hasn't the administration acted responsibly in the steps that it's taken from way back in late January up until now? Shouldn't we have some reassurance that we've got a handle on what this problem is like?
Well, one of the challenges, a number of authorities have suggested for quite a number of years there is the prospect of a pandemic. Certainly we had this experience in the last century. And so independent of administrations, there has been efforts in place to be able to prepare for a response. Big challenge is we don't have a vaccine yet, so there's a bit of a race, not a bit of a huge race to be able to get that in place. And there is really although you may have the elements in place, we don't know what would happen if there was so many cases that would overwhelm the health system. So we're really kind of hoping to limit that before we end up getting to a vaccine.
I think there are 50 cases worldwide, and I think that this can be a pandemic. I think our borders are, thank God for the oceans, and thank God that people are not traveling overseas. I've had friends that have canceled trips overseas. I have people that are not coming into the United States as well because they're afraid to travel. I think economically we're really being hurt because our supply chains from China have been cut off. And as you know, with that happens, that can greatly affect our economy, which is what caused the stock market to drop.
But Sam, I think you're underplaying the importance of the fact that President Trump acted quickly in January to limit the amount of foreign travel from China to the United States to only U.S. citizens, and the fact that he's enacted a quarantine for those cases that have come in, the Americans that have come in from overseas. It's not just that people are not traveling, but there's been decisive action by this administration.
And the media
Casey, I think if there's one thing that's very, very important, it's for us Democrats, Republicans, Independents, not to politicize whether somebody acted quickly or somebody delayed, because right now we're all on track and our goal is to keep our population safe.
So something that's promising is what's happening in Congress with bipartisan support for funding in order to carry our systems beyond April. Right now, we only have enough funding to take care of any problems through April, and Congress is coming together to pass more money.
Well, the media
Take us
came
further.
down really hard against Trump when he had a travel ban back in January. And imagine what would be going on right now if he had not done the ban. No matter what he does, he's going to be criticized and politicized for this whole thing. And so I think he's doing a great job so far.
Well, I think, Sam, you're absolutely right that the health of the nation is more important than politics. But politicians, by their very nature, have a very difficult time living up to that consideration.
I agree with you, but if I was politicizing this, which I have no intention of doing, I would point out that there was a lot of criticism of the president for being wishy-washy and delaying at the beginning of this until he called his press conference, and I think that his press conference was the best I have seen him on TV. He had professionals behind him, and he is certainly making an effort to control this illness.
Well,
and that's as far as it's going to go, Casey.
You're playing into a
We should
narrative
not-
that is false, because the president created a task force in the White House 4 weeks ago. He imposed the ban on travel 4 weeks ago. So
Casey,
the idea that he didn't do anything until his press conference is a false narrative.
I refuse to politicize this anymore, Casey. I'm not talking about it. We're all working together for the benefit of our citizens, from the president down, and I think we ought to leave it at that and support every institution that we have to keep us safe.
All right, can the church give me an amen?
Amen.
Amen. We'll go on.
And keep calm and wash your hands.
Yes.
There you go.
And we get another amen for that. All right. So let's go on to the General Assembly. And the Kirwan Commission's ambitious 10-year plan requiring $4 billion a year and new spending from state and local governments. Now, that sounded great when it was proposed, but the crass reality of how to pay for this is coming to fore. And even the Washington Post has criticized and editorialized Kirwan that says it costs a lot but delivers far too little. Sam, I'm going back to you. You're the oracle of political wisdom. Before there was Kirwan, there was Thornton. Aren't all of these plans fluff? Are any of them worth what they're going to cost?
Interesting question, Casey, because today at noon, I met with my Romeo group at the Dish and Dram in Kensington with some of the questions that we were going to talk about. And number one on the list was Kirwan. And I'll tell you what I discovered. It's very interesting. Some people are knowledgeable about Kirwan. Some people have no idea what it is, and most have no understanding of what it's going to cost and why it's going to cost so much and what we're going to get out of it. One lady popped up and said, look, there's a list of taxes or charges, to pay for this. But when you add it all up, we're still short of funding.
Yes.
And just like going back to Thornton, which I truly objected to because I don't believe in unfunded federal mandates. I think they're absolutely terrible. And put us $150 million in debt in the state, that Kirwan will do the same thing. And worst of all, I'm really concerned that the money's not going to be spent wisely. And as you know, there is a divide in this county between East and West. And East has always, Casey, always not received the proper funding that we need in our school system.
But we got to go on because the question is the plan any good, or is it just the cost, Mark?
Well, I think the plan deserves to be examined much more because, of course, sometimes the narrative is just spend more money and we'll get better education. The verdict is very much out on whether or not the how shall I say, the marquee recommendation of pre-K is really that much of a help. We've got in this country a long-standing experience with Head Start, and what we find out is when we look at the data over many years that was reviewed under a number of administration, is you have the Head Start fade, which is that the benefits of starting education earlier end up becoming basically evaporating by third grade. So the question is, if you have this experience where pre-K is not as effective, why would we want to be spending so much money in order to do it?
Because it's part of a pathway. It's an important early pathway. One of the most important things for 0 to 3 is language acquisition. And if children do not have a certain number of thousands of words in their vocabulary, they start out behind and they stay behind. So we do need pre-K, but we also need those important supports so that children are reading to learn by 3rd grade. And that's where making sure we have the best and most experienced teachers in the classroom in elementary school is important. Right now in Montgomery County, inexperienced teachers are in the schools that have the highest needs, and the best and most experienced teachers are in the easier schools.
Well, but the key point of the Washington Post editorial was that is the answer just throwing money at the problem? Because and I'm going to ask Laurie this, is the answer just to throw more money at the problem, or is the answer to come up with a better program?
Yeah, the answer, money is part of the solution to having a good school system. We have to pay quality teachers, and you got to have money to do that. However, I think what the Kirwan Commission is sorely lacking is a focus. I think the focus needs to change towards parents. There's nothing in there that really talks about parent involvement. I think if every school had a small group of parents who were watchdogs or who were involved in the school and would speak up when they see something wrong, then we would see a turnaround in some of our schools. If we educated parents more and worked with them to help them have the tools that they need to help their kids, there would be an improvement in education. And of course, we need accountability to help parents know how to measure their school with other schools.
All right, now, but Cynthia, this is the final point that the Washington Post made, was that the Kirwan Commission, and they praised the Kirwan Commission for this. They said that the Kirwan Commission finally, broke through the myth that Maryland schools are top ranked nationally, and then in reality, they're mediocre. So are we dealing with mediocre schools here in Montgomery County?
Montgomery County schools are pretty good, but there are significant divides, and I don't know anybody in Montgomery County, including the superintendent, who is complacent about it. But it does take more funding, and it also takes more creativity and more incentives, as I said, to bring those best and
But then
teachers
how do you
into
overcome
high-load
what Sam was
schools.
talking about, the great divide between the east and the west parts of the county? Is it just money that's going to do that, or is there really programmatic changes that you can have? Now you notice today that they delayed announcing the boundary study.
Yes.
So is that going to be the magic bullet to make all this thing work?
2 points, Casey. The biggest 2 subjects at Montgomery College are remedial English and remedial math. And as far as the redistricting goes, that in itself is an absolute bear because people have not been paying attention to this and it's been going on.
I got to wrap it up, Sam. Thank you. Great topic. When we come back from this short break, we're going to talk about what's going on up in Rockville. The county council bans the release of helium balloons and requires air conditioning in all rental apartments. Stay tuned. The Montgomery County Council was busy this past week, passing a requirement that all rental apartments have air conditioning and banning the release of helium balloons. Cynthia, it makes me very proud to see all the gravitas coming from the Stella B. Warner office building, but I digress. What do you think about the council's requirement that all rental units have air conditioning?
I think it's a good requirement because how would you like to be an elderly person with a health problem and stuck inside a stuffy, hot apartment in the summertime? I think it is a good bill, and it will provide for renters what they need. And in addition to just having the unit, this bill also requires that those units are maintained and are in working order. So I think it's a good bill and a good addition for protecting renters.
Even if it increases the rental costs, hundreds of dollars per unit?
Would it increase it hundreds of dollars?
How do you capitalize those expenses?
Does
They
anybody have
say
an
to
idea
put
how
in
many
to
units
put
there
in
would be?
air conditioning into each room can cost as much as $2,000 a piece if you're doing forced air conditioning.
Are you talking about central? Because
Yes,
this would
yes.
allow window. You can use window units
Okay,
as
but-
well,
but if
and
a-
that's not thousands of dollars.
But if all right, so but it is certainly hundreds of dollars.
Couple $100.
Yeah.
And who's going to pay
$100?
the electricity? Is it going to be the landlord, and he's going to pass that on?
The landlord, well, we'll see. I don't know. Some landlords may, but I think that is
What
that
what
is a
landlord isn't, huh?
baseline. I
Said
think
the-
that air conditioning is a baseline. We live in humid, hot Montgomery County, and
This
in
isn't
Maryland,
Texas.
our
This isn't
oh,
Phoenix.
But it's hot. Have
Well,
you
how many
have you
units are- do
experienced
we
July
know how
and
many
August and
units?
September in Montgomery County?
So
we know
without
how
air
many units
conditioning?
I want
are?
to go to Mark because he's the only one who hasn't acted like a Democrat at the South Carolina debate. Mark, your turn.
Okay, I think there's a real mixed message here on climate change and global warming with this particular action. 13% of the world's electricity is used for air conditioning. There's 2 billion tons of CO2. Basically, that's the equivalent of the CO2 that comes out of India. So if you're going to make the case that we should be worried about climate change, then you really need to be able to accept some of the trade-offs in terms of what.
Then people who live in 8,000 square foot houses should shut a few rooms off and not cool 8,000 square feet. Or 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, rather than putting it on the backs of poor people who are renters.
Wait a minute. Who's to say that these people don't live in all 8,000 square feet? I mean,
Please.
please. I mean, honestly, these houses have been built. They've been built to code and regulation that are existing in Montgomery County. Who's to regulate? Is big government supposed to come in and tell you can't use those 3 bedrooms?
No, I'm simply trying to illustrate a point that people who are sitting happily in their 8,000 square foot houses, air conditioning all 8,000 square feet, who might object to this bill for renters to have
No,
a
the person
little
who's
air
going to
conditioning.
object to it is the poor guy who's going to have to come out of pocket $250 a month to pay for the additional air conditioning costs, which he doesn't have. Laurie, isn't that the whole point? That this is just going to make it more expensive to have rental housing in Montgomery County?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a Republican sitting on the county council, and that is why there was no discussion at the table on the unintended consequences of this bill. I talked to an expert in affordable housing who said that when you have to add an extra unit onto your apartment unit, it's $250 for the actual unit, but then you have to retrofit it for better electricity, for more amps on your electricity. And that costs thousands of dollars per unit. If you have 40 units, you know how much it's going to cost? A lot of money for that for the landlord. The tenant will have to pay for the service as well for having air conditioner. So there's a lot of expense that was not even discussed, and it was not even in the bill. When I looked at the bill, it doesn't explain how much it's going to cost. There's going to be an inspector who's going to come, and now there's an extra added for every person. Only 3.9% of our units are not air conditioned right now. Now everybody is going to be subjected to an inspector who's going to come in and check to make sure they're maintaining their units, and they're going to get fined $500 if they're not, and it's just adding one more level of bureaucracy we don't need.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Bloomberg, down here on the
I'm
on
just
the end.
trying to be polite. I don't want to talk over people like the South Carolina debates took place. I'd like to know how many units we're talking about, and it seems to me that these units are located in older housing, because more modern housing has air conditioning.
I think
And there's
houses
some-
were exempt from this.
Houses
bill.
were
Houses
houses-
raise
And
your
I
hand.
think Laurie gave the figure was like 3.9. I mean, was
3.9%
Right.
of rental units are not air conditioned in the county.
Well, Sam, Laurie is right. Single-family housing is been eliminated.
Right.
But so it applies to townhouses, and it applies.
No, I think it applies to buildings built
No.
before 1960.
Townhouses
probably.
are also included in the bill.
Are they?
Anyway, we got to keep moving on. Mark, the council has considered a listening tour to consider changes to the county charter, including doing away with the 4 at-large council seats and going to 9 separate councilmanic districts. How likely is this going to be?
Well, I'm not sure
passed?
that the council's necessarily, this is an idea that's been kicked around. I'm not sure the council's going to embrace it, but I think what we are going to hear is from the voters. There's an excellent chance, I think, of a referendum going on the ballot for this November that would give voters the chance to be able to opine and make a decision on this. I know, Laurie, you testified in the last couple of weeks. There were some news accounts about that in support of this. This is a grassroots initiative that includes folks from around the county, although I must say up county, outside of Silver Spring, forgive me, and Tacoma Park, our people are concerned about the lack of representation proportionally that they have on the council.
Yes.
Sam?
Thank you. We've been through this battle once before,
Yeah?
because we did have everyone elected from within districts. But then the populace felt, and politicians felt, that those people who were representing folks within district were not considering legislation and budgeting and all types of other things, including redistricting. So we went to an individual person from each council district and 4 members at large. So the 5 people still represented the district. We still have the 4 at large. I don't think it's going to fly.
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap this up, and I'm sorry. I know everyone is disappointed that we're not going to be able to talk about whether the Democratic primary is going to be relevant in April because we're running out of time. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the. Now, welcome back. Mark Uncapher with parting shots.
Casey, usually on this show, it's sort of man bites dog. We talk about the council. We're critical of the council, but let me say something positive about the council, and that was the action that they took, voting by 6-3 not to support legislation that would allow them to have increased the piggyback tax that is imposed by the county. To be sure, they said they want to wait and look for it and see what happens with Kirwan, but I want to acknowledge that and give them props for avoiding that tax increase just yet.
Yeah, they want to get reelected. Sam, your parting shot.
The question was asked today at my focus group whether or not on April 22nd, Maryland will play in the Democratic convention, and I think it will. My prediction is that Mr. Biden will win this week in South Carolina. That on Super Tuesday, I don't think anybody is going to command enough of a significant lead, plus with the other primaries coming along, to go into the convention with a sure lead to take the convention on a first ballot. And if that happens, in my opinion, Mike Bloomberg will win on the second ballot. So folks, if you want to vote April 22nd, you must register to vote. This is from all of my independent and Republican friends. If you want to participate in the presidential race this year, you must register to vote by April the 7th. April the 7th, you have to register to vote. You can do so online, you can go to the library and get a card, whatever. So please register and participate in our democratic process.
Thank you, Sam. Cynthia Rubenstein, your parting shot.
Montgomery County is mourning Ruby Rubens, who died on Thursday. She was a fair housing activist, an educational equity activist. She was tough-minded and good-hearted, and Montgomery County will miss her. They don't make them like Ruby Rubens anymore.
Thank you, Cynthia. Laurie Halverson, your parting shot.
Yes, well, we all know from today that education is very important for a lot of us. And there are, when we have the primary coming up, we have 13 people running in the at-large race for Board of Education. So it's important to get to know your candidates so you know who to vote for. There are at least 2 forums that I know of. One of them is the Women's League of Voters. They're having one on the 30th of March. I went online and it looks like they're already full. It looks like you can't sign up to go there anymore, but there is another one. The Montgomery County Federation of Republican Women are having one on March 16th between 6:30 and 8:30 at Potomac Community Center. Everyone's welcome. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, come on out and get to know your candidates.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you all to the panel for a great debate, a very lively debate. We blew through all the topics. In fact, we didn't have time to address everything that I wish we could have taken on today. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken.